So, John, we're filming a few clips about common questions we're often asked, and perhaps one of the most common questions, especially by skeptics and atheists, etc., they just put comments on our clips, is why, if you could heal people, why don't you go into hospitals? So, what's our answer to that?
Well, first of all, the majority of hospitals don't allow healing evangelists or even Christians to come and pray for the patients.
Well, anyone. You can't just be a stranger and waltz in.
You can't. And so it's a major problem, because you've actually got to know the patient generally to even have that contact to pray for them. And so some churches are stricter than others, or some hospitals rather are very, very strict. And if they saw me even talking about Jesus or praying for someone, they'd soon throw you out of the hospital.
Well, so for example, doctors and nurses, even if they're Christian doctors and nurses, unless they're in a Christian hospital or a private place, they themselves are not allowed to witness.
They can't.
And so, but you need to say, when we are invited, and if we're in an area, there are times when we do go to hospitals.
Yeah, and quite often people put comments, and they say, what did you go and pray for sick in hospitals? And I'll answer them and say, okay, you arrange it and I'll come. And those people never get back to me, Julie.
Well, no, the point is, you would love to be able to do that.
Of course I'd love to. I love to pray for people if I was invited.
And you have done, and you've
many
seen,
times.
You've got lots of extraordinary stories of wards being healed, nurses, all sorts of people in hospitals.
Because people have this attitude, why has it got to be in church meetings? Why has it got to be one or two here and there? Why don't you? The thing is, they say, why don't you go to the hospital, empty the hospitals?
They all assume that we're all about money, and therefore they think we're wanting people to be in a place where money. Well, the truth is, we would love to have open ministry in a hospital, but the reality is it's run by and full of skeptical people, but also people who have to look out for the safety of their patients. They don't know who you are. The doctors and nurses don't know who you are.
In fact, I'll give you the example. When I was doing meetings at Wishaw in Scotland, that's about an hour, half an hour's drive from Glasgow. Anyway, and so this medical doctor who had fibromyalgia got healed after 4 years being bedridden. And so everybody knew her as being very ill. And so she had a friend who was the head of the visitors program at Glasgow Hospital. And once a week they get all the patients together to talk about the hospital procedures and to talk about, different diseases. And so they invited me almost undercover to be a guest speaker, because I was a minister from Australia, to come and talk to the staff and the patients. And I'm getting hot here, Julie.
We'll just get back to the shady
and
bit.
And also the patients' loved ones. And so they got a room at the hospital, Glasgow Hospital, and they filled it full of sick people, and they told just some of the people what was going to happen. And they invited me to speak, because I was a Reverend John Mellor from Australia. And so I got up to speak, and then I began to get words of knowledge, and God began to show me people who are sick. And so I started to call, it said, someone here's got this condition, that condition, come out and I'll pray for you. And because I went up to them, laid hands, and God healed them. So I had a healing meeting, and the lady who organised it, who was in charge of the visitation program, she had suffered for many years from this painful, I think it was lupus. She was totally healed. And so she began to bring patients along to my healing meetings, Julie. And so that was the only time where hospital staff were able to get a room for me to go to.
But you often lament or wish
that
a hospital would invite you, even if, sometimes the TV stations, the secular news come, and you think, well, you wish they would put you to the test by giving you a room in a hospital. And those who would like prayer would be prayed for.
It'd be a wonderful thing to do.
But the fact is, you often pray for people in hospitals. It tends to be pastors and friends or people who live near us, because obviously we cannot go. We're not going to jump on a plane and travel across the world. Because we're travelling all the time. We don't have time to go everywhere in the world. So it tends to be local people.
I'll tell you, a very interesting time was, I was doing meetings with the Church of Scotland and in a place called Dunfermline. And what happened was that there was a missionary who went to Africa, and she had a terminal disease, and she was only given weeks to live. Her body had shut down, and so the Reverend asked me if I'd come and pray for her in the week before I was going to have these healing meetings. And so I went up to pray for her in the hospital, laid hands on her, the power of God flowed for her, and by the way, she was released in 3 days, totally healed. But what happened, after I prayed for her, I asked the Reverend Dick Hammond, I said, Dick, would you mind if I pray for some of the other sick people in the ward? He said, oh, John, it's not the procedure. I'll have to ask the sister on duty. So he went up and said, oh, listen, I have a visiting reverend from Australia. Would you mind if you pray for a few of the patients? Oh, no, go ahead. And so what happened, he went around and asked ones who wanted prayer, and I prayed for them. The power of God began touching these people. Some were getting slain in the spirit, knocked back by the power of God in their beds, and amazing miracles. People were getting healed all over the ward, and the nurses just were in shock. And then it happened, Julie, then the undertaker walked in. The undertaker came in because someone had died. He came to pick up the body. And what happened, he walked in, his arm was in a sling. So the Reverend Dick Hammond said to him, oh, what happened to your arm? He said, I've been lifting too many bodies and I've strained my arm. And this is right in the middle of the ward. And so the Reverend Dick Hammond said, well, I'm a visiting minister from Australia. He has a healing gift. He can pray for you now. God can heal you. He said, really? So he was in so much pain. He let me lay hands on him. He was totally healed. Took his sling off, waved his arms around. And so when I prayed for him, the power of God touched him. He went flying. He was about 6'4". He went flying back, hit the wall, and he was sliding on the wall. And so there was me and the Reverend Hammond trying to hold his body up, and the nursing staff was stopped. People were staring at him, and it was absolutely amazing. God was doing miracles, and even the undertaker got healed.
So the point is, we would love to go into hospitals and pray for people, and if someone could organise that at one time, we're up for it. You're
Fantastic.
up for it. You often think too, you know how football teams are often injured, and then they're key players out for months or weeks, and you said, oh boy, I wish one of those teams would invite me to come along, and I'd just keep praying for the players. And
it's true. I feel very sad when I hear about great footballers retiring because of injuries. And I know I can heal them. Like last few years, I've met personally Justin Thurston. I've met Mellor Malinga. You might know these are very, very well-known Australian or Queensland players. And I've actually, getting hot again, but I've actually met them. But you know what? I would love to pray for these teams. I know that when they got injured, I could lay hands on them and they could go back in the field, Julie. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it would be fun.
It'd be fun. It would happen. So it'd be great. But the thing is, it could be a bit sort of prejudice against the other team, I know. But maybe I could pray for both teams as they got injured.
Yeah, and they'd be sort of then like those Transformers that never die. They just, all cartoon characters, they fall off the cliff and they just spring back to life. It's sort of like that. But
it's amazing. I've seen amazing injuries be healed. Like, I'll give you an example. I was at a beach one day, and a boy...
have we been on this? Let's do the Rainforest Trail.
Okay, and this young surfer, he actually came off his board, and he hit a sandbank, and he dislocated his big toe. It was doubled. It was out of joint. And he was crying in so much pain. So I went up and said, can I pray for you? He said, just what do you want? In so much pain. So I laid hands on him, and instantly the swelling went down and his toe straightened. He was amazed. I've seen many instant miracles that I've laid hands on people with injuries.
Over the years, we've prayed for a number of elite athletes who've come quietly along to our meetings. I remember we were in New Zealand, and there was somebody who was in the New Zealand ski team, and he actually was injured just before the last Olympics, or maybe might have been 2 Olympics ago.
Who's that famous soccer player? I played for his mother-in-law. She was blind.
Yeah, Cahill.
Yeah, Tim Cahill is Australia's most talented soccer player. His mother-in-law was totally blind, and she came to a meeting in Sydney and God opened her eyes. And it was amazing. And so we do see God do extraordinary things. But come back to hospitals. Our heart is to preach the gospel wherever. And I've been to many, many hospitals. But if you're listening to this, if you belong to a hospital, if you can get permission, and if I'm in your area, I'd love to come and pray have a meeting, either healing meeting in,
just to offer it to whoever would like it,
Yeah.
whatever patient might like it.
or get a room at the hospital, round them up, herd them up.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great, Julie?
Anyway, so that's our answer to this common question that we're thrown at. We don't give energy to answering it, but now I think I'll flick them the link to this video. So that is our answer.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay.
God bless you all.
For watching. Thank you.